Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. We'll go ahead and give everyone another minute to join before we get started. In the meantime, make sure to locate the Q&A button in the Zoom control panel at the bottom of your screen, and feel free to submit any questions throughout our webinar today that you have for our speakers. We'll do the best we can to answer all the questions, and if we don't get through them today, we'll follow up via email afterwards. So make yourselves comfortable, and we'll get started in just a moment. All right, we'll go ahead and get started with today's discussion. Thank you everyone for joining us. We're going to dive into Google My Business insights that we've pulled based on an analysis of over 200 multi-location brands. We'll discuss essentially how these shifts have impacted consumer behavior since the onset of COVID-19 and how to prepare your local marketing efforts for the future. Now, I'll introduce myself and today's panel. My name is Crystal Tang, the Director of Local Strategy at Rio SEO. And I'm joined by two of my colleagues, Marshall and Ryan, on today's call. Marshall, do you want to go ahead and give us a little background about what you do at Rio, types of brands that you work with, and maybe what you're looking forward to most after coronavirus and things kind of reopen?
Yeah, thanks, Crystal. So I've been with Rio for just under 2 years now. I'm focused on restaurants and franchise-based businesses, and I'm based in Philadelphia with my wife and my daughter. So definitely a thing we're looking to do post-corona is definitely get back into some restaurants, be able to go out to eat, and definitely looking to travel again at some point. So excited to see things starting to open back up.
Awesome. Thanks for joining us, Marshall. And then we also have Ryan. Ryan, do you want to tell the audience a little bit about what you're doing at Rio and then also what you're looking forward to?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Crystal. So my name's Ryan Weber. I'm the Director of Client Success here at Rio. I've been with the company for about 5 years. I've been working in digital marketing and specifically local search for about 10. Yeah, as far as what I'm looking forward to, I got to echo Marshall. A good restaurant, right? I mean, we've got our favorites here that we've been trying to support through takeout and delivery, but it's not the same, right, as dining in, and definitely looking forward to getting back to that experience. And then travel too. I've got to admit, we've been looking at destinations and just kind of calculating when is the right time to travel again. So that's another one that we're looking forward to as well.
I'd say me and Ryan are also looking forward to babysitters again.
That too.
Yes, that would be great. So thank you guys both for being with us today. A few reminders before we get started. All attendees are muted, but as I mentioned earlier, we welcome your questions throughout the webinar, which you can send to us by locating the Q&A button on the bottom of the panel. If we don't get to those questions live, we will follow up via email. But if you have any questions, feel free to email us at marketing@rioseo.com, or you can follow along on Twitter at @Rio_SEO. We've released a blog post that goes further into depth on what we're talking about today, so make sure to check the resources section of our website for more takeaways. Then finally, today's webinar is being recorded, and we will send a link to the recording as well as a white paper within the next 24 hours, so look out for a follow-up email from our team. So let's go ahead and jump into today's agenda. Today, we're going to explore trends that impacted brands during the peak of COVID-19 and our top takeaways to better help brands prepare for the next time they need to quickly pivot their local marketing efforts. The agenda for today will include an executive summary of the study we conducted, presenting our key findings, local search insights through COVID-19, key takeaways, and we will leave you with some local marketing best practices during times of crisis. Obviously, we know things are still impacted by COVID-19, so it's not necessarily a post-COVID-19, but really a forward-looking view on what we've seen. So a little background on this study. At Rio, we analyzed local search data for nearly 200,000 US businesses over a 10-week period from February 24th to April 27th, 2020. These locations were organized in 6 broad categories, those being service businesses, financial services, restaurant/hospitality, which is broken down into sit-down restaurants, quick service restaurants, and hotels. Then we also included retail, healthcare, and multifamily residential. Now let's dive deeper into the key findings and discuss what we saw and why search behavior shifted at the onset of the coronavirus pandemic. So understandably, the coronavirus pandemic significantly impacted local search behavior. From the beginning to the end of the range we studied, we saw local searches decrease overall by 27.3% as American lives were dramatically impacted by COVID-19. The pandemic affected consumer behavior both in-store and online as people sheltered in place and brick and mortar stores temporarily closed. Ryan, do you think you can speak a little bit to what this meant for brands and what they should do if they see a sudden drop in local search behavior? You know, should there be some other crisis in the future or anything that may impact it like we've seen recently?
Yeah, absolutely. I think what's interesting is, you know, in addition to the significant decrease in search volume, we also saw kind of a shift in the type of search, right? So as far as what people were looking for, we saw a lot of activity, people understandably looking into temporary closures, right? Or if operating hours were changing, if brands were offering special hours for vulnerable shoppers, things like that. Also, searches for specific product inventory. So I'm sure everyone remembers, especially in the early days, toilet paper, hand sanitizer, were difficult things to track down, right? And so there was a lot of search volume, people trying to track down that specific type of inventory. And also over the course of the pandemic, people have begun to look more for alternative fulfillment methods. So things like, you know, curbside pickup, local delivery. In the healthcare vertical, is telehealth available? So you know, as far as what brands should do or how they should respond, I mean, you want to take all of that sort of consumer behavior, everything we've learned from the past few months, and apply a strategy to answer those questions as early in the funnel as you possibly can. So a lot of times what that means is getting updates to your Google My Business listings, right? And your other local listings across other publishers. Primarily with Google though, you know, we tended to focus there simply because Google has done so much to enable new attributes, adding new fields, allowing you to communicate those things. Is curbside pickup available? Is takeout and delivery available? Now we're seeing, you know, in-store shopping come back again. So, you know, one thing that's been clear throughout the pandemic is that as much as brands are trying to figure out how to respond, so are the publishers, right? I think it's amazing to see Google, and it's not just Google. I know Yelp has done a lot. Bing has made some changes as well to try to surface more of these commonly asked questions, the details that consumers are looking for. You know, brands trying to surface that in the actual SERP itself. Beyond your listings though, you should also be leveraging your individual location pages, right? So whether you're publishing updates on how your organization as a whole is responding to COVID-19, or how you're responding at the individual market or regional level, right? Because we know, you know, the spread has been different across the country, right? In different regions, different cities, the regulations on reopening are different. So you need to have that flexibility at the individual location level or at the city or regional level as well. When you're posting those updates on your pages, you definitely want to use structured data. There's a special announcement schema that allows you to more easily surface that in SERP. And then finally, going back to those product-based queries, if possible, you definitely want to have a plan in place to surface in-store inventory on your individual landing pages, right? So again, someone's looking for that specific product. If you have that flow of information in place to surface that on the individual location page, again, with some type of call to action for alternative fulfillment methods, whether that's curbside pickup, online services or delivery.
Awesome. Yeah, no, I feel like this entire period has been like a test. So, you know, brands really should take all of those considerations, learn from it, and determine how you adjust moving forward. And should something like this, you know, hopefully not as drastic, happen again in the future. So those are all very good points. So all of the businesses that, you know, we evaluated in this study were impacted in some way by the coronavirus pandemic. However, we saw that quick service restaurants, healthcare, and service businesses saw the greatest volatility and local search volume over the period from February 24th to April 27th. Interest in local sit-down restaurants also took a dramatic fall, only slightly lifting at the end of the study period. Marshall, do you want to speak a little bit to which verticals we expect to see start to recover now that stay-at-home orders are being eased in many of states?
Yeah, definitely. I think the three verticals that we really saw impacted really the greatest was hotels, restaurants, and retail. And so we're seeing those three businesses start to reopen and try to come back. So for hotels, definitely seeing a slow incline to come back. I think, you know, they're probably still trying to figure out how they bring customers back in. It seems like restaurants and retail have made a lot of changes to their business model. Specifically restaurants, there's really kind of two scenarios. Either one where you're a sit-down restaurant and you basically have been, you know, totally shut down and haven't been able to serve customers, or you have some sort of takeout, curbside, drive-through, and your business hasn't been impacted as drastically as some of the sit-down businesses. So I'm starting to see the sit-down businesses now pick up as some have outdoor seating, which is helping with those businesses open up a little bit more quickly. But the businesses for restaurants that had curbside delivery or drive-through, those are the ones that are coming back the fastest. So that's why you see either fast food or some of the quick serve locations are doing well, where some of the sit-down ones are still struggling to come back. And then retail is the last area where we're starting to see locations starting to open back up. Some of the malls are beginning to open back up. So that's going to be the next area where we start to see a big spike in locations starting to come back online. And so all these businesses are trying to figure out the same thing. How do we set up our business to deal with the new normal? So sharing attributes about pickup, delivery, curbside, you know, businesses are really just trying to get that information out. And so I think that's also helping with the comeback, because getting that information out to the customers, letting them know how things are going to work in the future is definitely essential. So I think hotels, restaurants, and retail are starting to slowly come back.
Yeah, and obviously the data we pulled kind of went through the end of April. We've even seen, you know, throughout May that, you know, many of these changes are being reflected in the data as well. So I know I've seen, you know, plenty of instances where, you know, in San Diego here, they essentially closed some streets, and we have a community called Little Italy where there's a ton of Italian restaurants. And so all of the dining is now outdoors. So I imagine that's going to, you know, probably replicate it in many other areas, especially in the summertime. So that I imagine that will be increased, and we'll see that rising over the next few weeks as well. So I think we also saw that the week of March 23rd marked the greatest decline in local search clicks during the 10-week lockdown period that we studied, with hotels falling the furthest with 30.4% fewer clicks on local search results than the week prior. And sit-down restaurants were not far behind with a drop of 20.8%. So Marshall, I'm going to come back to you again because I think you have the greatest insight into this one. But Ryan, feel free to add, you know, any other commentary. Why do you think quick service restaurant searches have been gaining popularity despite the coronavirus pandemic? Do you have any advice for what they should be focusing on right now in their local marketing efforts?
Yeah, we've definitely seen a big rise in quick serve fast food restaurants. I think it's just the businesses were built for ease, convenience. It wasn't ever really built around people having to come into the location. So, people are in their cars now. They want to be able to just stop at the location, either drive through or have someone bring the food out to their car now. So with that shift in the way businesses are operating, it seems like the quick serve restaurants or fast food were able to adopt this or kind of roll it out more seamlessly than some of the sit down restaurants. It seems like a lot of the sit down restaurants, they're more focused on trying to get outdoor seating or set up inside with some barriers. So it seems like there's a little bit more a delay with getting people back into sit down restaurants just because some of the regulations where quick serve, a lot of those places are not even opening their dining rooms back up, and they're just staying open for drive through, pickup, or delivery. So I think with just kind of the way the business model is, and they were fortunately set up for this with kind of how their businesses are.
Yeah, and I think we can all three of us can probably relate to this too, right? When you're in quarantine and you're locked down, right? Especially with kids at home and you're trying to work from home, the last thing you want to do after your day is done is to go in the kitchen and cook, right? So I think that huge spike in quick service searches, I can relate to that, right? I'm part of that gray bar right there, ordering takeout, ordering delivery. So I think, probably many folks on the call can relate to that. So that one's probably not a huge shock that we saw that spike for quick serve.
Yeah. And the thing about delivery too is we didn't order delivery. We just specifically went for quick serve restaurants where, a lot of the sit down restaurants are offering delivery. But we noticed, as having a family, we want to get dinner quickly. Some of the delivery times I've noticed hour plus or even longer. So being able just to make your order right now and go to the drive-thru and pick it up and be back home within 15-20 minutes is just that ease and convenience. And you're not really getting that anywhere else. And I think that's ultimately what's really driving that.
Yeah, I would just add, kind of from a consumer perspective, there's, still plenty of sit-down restaurants that maybe haven't updated their attributes and maybe are so busy with adjusting to this new kind of business style that they're not answering their phones as frequently. So I think when you consider, sit down, pickup, or delivery versus a quick service, I don't think you have as many questions about what's going to be available, what's going to be offered with a quick service restaurant. So I certainly think that benefited those types of businesses throughout this period.
Yeah, good point. So
what we also saw were that map views for hotels, banks, and grocery stores and hospitals and other types of essential businesses dropped dramatically as consumers reacted to the growing threat of COVID-19. And I think I'm actually off a slide here. Let me see. Okay, yeah, we're on essential businesses. Organic search views for non-essential business types like clothing stores and home decor brands, both dine-in and quick service restaurants among them, dipped only slightly in the weeks following the declaration of a national emergency. So, Ryan, Marshall, throw this up to either of you. Why are we seeing clicks to call and clicks to websites continuing to trend downwards? What should brands be focusing on right now in their listings doing to this ongoing trend?
Yeah.
No, go ahead.
Sorry, Marshall. Just really quickly, I think, on that slide that you were showing previously, Crystal, the clicks for directions were increasing, right? And I think it was at the expense of phone calls and website clicks. I think there's probably two factors at play here. One is just the shift in consumer behavior, right? As more businesses started to reopen, it was becoming safer and easier to transact in person versus online or through e-commerce. But the other thing is, by this point in late April, where we see everything's kind of converging again, Google had rolled out a lot of those features, right? Allowing brands to communicate updates directly in the SERP. This basically meant that there was less need, right? There were fewer questions that consumers had to ask of the business directly because it was already labeled right there. Curbside pickup is available, or shopping for the vulnerable population is every Wednesday from 7 to 8 a.m., right? They're kind of answering questions in the SERP more readily. So those additional clicks for website and phone call, I think were less necessary, and you could just click for driving directions and go visit a location.
Agreed. Marshall, did you have anything to add there?
Yeah, I mean, just from taking a look at the search view. So you have search views and you have map views. Map views obviously have gone down, less people looking at the maps and making search while they're at home. The interesting thing we did see was search views went up. So people are looking for that information about brands. So that information, that thirst for information has gone up significantly. So while businesses were trying to navigate how they would operate during Corona, people are saying, hey, I go to this business normally. I know they're open late, but maybe they're not anymore. I need to check their hours of operation, or maybe they have new policies. So saw a lot of traffic being driven that way. And from that specific traffic from search views, it's definitely seeing a lot of website visits and definitely a lot of phone calls. So I'm still seeing that rise with some of my clients. Some of them, it is leveling out or kind of starting to go back down. For restaurants, definitely seeing still a rise with website and phone calls. And I think that just kind of plays into, now that they're opening back up, more restaurants are offering delivery or to go. And so you're going to see more people going to the website to make those orders or calling in to make those orders. So I would say for restaurants, we don't really want to see it go down too much, but it should obviously level off at some point as people start to come back in. So it's kind of like you want to look at directions versus websites and phone calls. And so, as your phone calls and website clicks start to come down from where they peak, you want to see directions start to come back up. So your overall clicks should stay the same, but definitely want to keep an eye on that. But definitely seeing some positive stuff there for some businesses that have made an effort to really focus on delivery or to go.
Yeah, I'm going to bounce back to the click to calls as well, because I know in the very beginning, we saw a huge increase in call volume across a number of verticals. And that has slowed down. But I think, like to Ryan's point, it makes sense. And that, people didn't have this information. It wasn't available on Google. But we saw less people clicking driving directions at that point because they needed to call first. So I think, yeah, this pretty much tracks the consumer behavior of what we've seen. And so now we'll talk about essential versus non-essential businesses, which we saw a steady rise in search views before they took a sharp dive the week of April 27th. Map views, however, weren't as steady, dropping significantly in the first few weeks of our study before picking up traction again around the week of March across all essential businesses. So what do you think, non-essential businesses saw less of a change in search volatility across maps and search? Maybe Ryan, we'll go to you first for your opinion about that.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting. The timing of the drop and recovery is similar for both essential and non-essential, right? For map views. What's more interesting to me is that the search views for non-essential businesses, right? You sort of have this slow decline into late March, where it sort of bottoms out and then slowly starts to recover again. You mentioned some of those non-essential categories that we look at. One is home decor, right? With everyone being, locked in at home, working from home, being indoors all the time, I think it probably led to people starting to think about, hey, how can I upgrade this space a little bit, right? Maybe I need a new chair for the home office, or need a new, I don't know, something for the back patio, right? So I think that's maybe why that the search views, again, these are e-commerce transactions rather than map views where you're physically going to a business. I think maybe that's why we saw less of an impact on a relatively stable search volume for the non-essential businesses.
Awesome. I think we've seen too, as we've dived into some of the queries which are in GMB. Unfortunately, you can't download them in bulk. You can't access them via API, but they've showed some very interesting trends about, what users are searching to find businesses on Google My Business, and specifically showing up your listing and how that's different now versus, what it was last year at this time. And yeah, to your point, Ryan, there are office supply stores that, typically would be getting queries primary for, office supplies that are now just getting like standing desk queries and tons of those. And I think that speaks to, a lot of these people shifting to working from home. So if you have not looked at any of those yet in GMB, I know it's not, the easiest thing to do if you've got a couple hundred or 1,000 locations, but even if you spot check some of your, most popular locations, you'll find some pretty interesting data there. So we've seen, we've kind of gone through all of, the data that we've discovered through clicks and views and searches and how it's adjusted. Let's maybe take it to Ryan for any final advice about how businesses can adjust during this period, what we've learned from what we've seen with how this has impacted search views, map views, which industries were maybe more or less impacted, and what do you think that looks like for the next 1 to 2 months?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I think, we touched on some that were hit most heavily, right? The full service restaurant space, sit down restaurants, hotels, obviously, some of the specialty retail businesses, anything that's service based. So, barbershops, salons, things like that, obviously saw a massive impact. I think, over the next couple of months, we are going to start to see some of those businesses recover. I think another area that is interesting to look at is in the healthcare vertical, right? Again, with the availability of telehealth, we've seen a huge increase in telehealth related searches, and Google's done a good job surfacing the links for, is online care available, and how do I quickly and easily schedule that appointment? So things that may have been, put off from a non-essential healthcare standpoint, I think we'll start to see that bounce back as well. But as far as overall takeaways, I mean, I think, I'd probably echo a lot of what I said at the top. I mean, the key really is owning all of the endpoints where you can publish these details, right? Try to help consumers out, cut down on the number of times they need to call or message or reach out to you to ask these questions by, answering the question higher up in the funnel directly in the search results, right? And further answering that question on page as well. That would be my guidance. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I liked what you said earlier, in that, this is Google My Business Insights, but don't forget about your local pages, where you oftentimes have more control to share more in-depth information about maybe like your policies, social distancing, and those types of things. And maybe you have connected, maybe a telehealth services for your healthcare, or an online appointment scheduling on your local landing pages. So if you haven't, and it's really core for your business, those are things to begin considering, as business is maybe still a little bit slower, but picking up, help those consumers kind of make their decision earlier on in the funnel. Marshall, I'll go to you, kind of top level. What are your overall thoughts about what we've learned over, the last few weeks, and just, kind of key takeaways?
I think that the number one thing that I've taken away since Corona started is that people really need that information, and making it easy to get and accessible is going to be key. And so I noticed a lot of brands, maybe the information on their location pages are kind of some of the information they were sharing was kind of really just for pre-COVID, but I think now that businesses are realizing that the landscape can change overnight, having a more flexible way of putting that information out there. So being able to update the pages easily, being able to do some Google posts, really just getting that information out to a customer. You think about the businesses you visit all the time. You probably never really look at their location page because you know what hours they're opening, you know what they offer. But the second that something happens where we're in a pandemic or some other type of scenario where businesses aren't operating under normal circumstances, being able to leverage that information, share it where your customers can get it easily is definitely important. I think the second piece is really how can businesses get back to where they were? Obviously, that's going to be a big piece of getting back to normal. I think businesses need to really focus on the new areas, delivery, takeout, e-com, making their business very accessible to customers. I think the businesses that really focus on those areas are the ones that are going to be able to get back to where they were as quick as possible. So definitely taking advantage of those pieces is going to be key.
Awesome. Yeah, we have a couple kind of best practices here. And I can't stress this first one enough. I would say over the last 3 months and still even now with, other things that are going on in the country are trends with your reviews. I'm working with a bunch of brands right now to adjust review response strategy, and what maybe was escalated or elevated, 3 months ago could be completely different to what's there now. And, especially if you're a restaurant, there's tons of new reviews about masks and gloves, and, some are positive and they're saying, there's great customer service, but I've seen plenty of negative reviews where, they're calling out specific staff members for not wearing, gloves and masks. So as a brand, make sure that that's something that you're paying attention to. I've seen this escalated to, franchise owners and managers, and getting more specific details and using that to respond to reviews, I think has been incredibly important. And, one of the ways to stay agile during this process. We've covered, updating your business profiles, your website, using schema markup, really just how critical local is in this process for consumers, I think has, just been astronomical during this period. I've seen, and I've been a part of a ton of conversations where within an organization, local was sometimes put on the back burner, but we've seen how critical it is. And me, I am a Google My Business Gold product expert, and I work on the GMB forums, and I've seen so many business owners come to the forum just like asking how to update their business information. They'd never claimed their listing before, but now they see all of this critical information displaying on there, and it's drawing them into understanding what a listing is and how valuable that is. So I think, that's been incredibly important. So if it's something that you weren't paying attention to before, it's even more important to pay attention to it now. And I think ultimately, just communicate with your customers, listen to them, explain to them kind of how you're adapting, whether that's on your site using GMB posts, your description, those types of things, share your special hours and your services, and expand on any content you can, whether that's listings or pages, or, other elements, blog posts, those types of things. All right, so that is all of the time we have for today's webinar. If you've added any questions that we weren't able to address, we will follow up afterwards. We also are going to send out the recording from today's webinar, as well as the white paper, where we really dive into a lot of the graphs that we just touched on high level through today's webinar. But I do want to thank, Ryan and Marshall for joining us and having this conversation. And hopefully, you guys can get to some restaurants safely soon.
Thanks, Crystal.
Thanks,
Awesome.
Crystal. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks all.